Hello and welcome to all in this video lecture series on C programming. We are discussing a concept of functions in C. Today we are going to talk about the types of functions which are there in programming language. So the first type is basically called as library function and the second is called as a user defined function. In short, whatever the functions are there that we are going to use in C programming language are divided into two types, out of which the first is called as a library function and the second one is called as a user defined function. So what is library function? So these functions are present in the C library, right? So when we are installing any compiler, right, so at that time these are present in this C library. They are predefined, means their definition is already mentioned. The best example are sqrt, scanf, this printf, strlen and strcompare, right? So we know that sqrt is used to find out the square root of given number. Scanf is used in order to access or take a data from user. Printf is used to send the data as an output on screen. strlen, that is a string length used to find out the length of input string, whereas this strcmp, that is string compare function, is used to compare the two strings here. Okay, so the associated whatever code is there, this code is already written, that means it is predefined. For example, right, so when I'm going to find out the square root of any number, if I'm writing here sqrt in bracket directly the variable which contains the number, automatically the square root has been calculated. So whenever I'm going to take a data as an input from user, so depending upon the kind of data that I'm going to take, right, so directly this data is assigned to the mentioned variable here. Okay. Similarly, whenever I want to print anything on the output screen, right, so with the help of this printf function, we are going to write it on the output screen. So in short, right, its code is predefined, and to support each of these functions, we have to include the library file. Okay, so as we know that when we are writing any program, the first of all we are writing this specific, say, the preprocessor, and what is that? Hash include. So hash include, what it does? Simple, it is going to include this defined library file as a header file in our program. So in order to find out the square root, we are supposed to use the sqrt, that is library, what we call this function. We are supposed to use the math.h, this library file. For printf and scanf, simple stdio.h, and for strcmp, that is string.h. Okay. In short, to support this library function, we have to include the header files. Whereas the second type, right? So the second type is a user-defined function. As per the user's requirement, user can define or user can write the own code. In short, it is going to define the definition for the function. Okay, so what it defines, users can create their own function for performing any specific task of program. So these type of functions are mainly called as a user defined. In short, the predefined functions which are present in C or any programming language, these are basically called as a library function, whereas the code or the function which are written in order to perform a specific task by user is called as a user defined function, right? So here more we are going to focus on user defined function. So just we had discussed, users can create their own functions for performing any specific task. These type of functions are called as a user defined function. In short, as per the requirement to perform the defined task or to perform the required task, simple, we are going to write a code, and that code basically we say as what? User defined function, or that function we are going to say as a user defined function, right? So to create this function, these are the three most important stages or things that we have to follow. The first step is function declaration, second function definition, and the third one is a function call. So whenever I am dealing with the concept of function, these are the three important stages as per requirement I have to write or I have to follow during dealing with this function. So let us see each of these type in detail. So the first one is called as a function declaration. Okay, so simple, the calling function needs information about the called function, right? So just try to find out the meaning of it. Fine. So as we see, whenever we are going to write a code, there should be one function, and the name of that function is what? Simple, your main function, right? And suppose to perform the addition of two numbers, I am writing the another function here, right? So what is the use of this kind of functions here, right? So when we are going to perform a required task at different, what we call the stages in the main function, instead of rewriting that code again and again, I will write simple this function. Okay, that code I will define as a function, right? And whenever required, suppose here is my line number 1, line number 2. At line number 2, I want to perform the addition of two numbers, right? So what I'm supposed to do, I'm supposed to write the code for the addition, right? Line number 3, line number 4, and line number 5. Suppose at line number 5 or at fifth stage, again I want to do the addition of two numbers. Again I am supposed to write the code here, right? And suppose the addition code is of 4 lines. So what will happen? Okay, in main function, stage 1 fine, at stage 2 again just write the 4-line code, stage 3 fine, stage 4 fine, and at stage 5 again write a code for this, or the 4-line code for the addition. Instead, I will do the same task in this way, right? Whatever these 4 lines are there which are going to perform the addition, that I am going to define as a separate function. And whenever I require, instead of writing this code again and again in my main program, simple, here I am going to call the add function, right? So what will happen? When the compiler executes my code, it first executes stage number 1. When it reaches to stage number 2, it directly jumps to the add function. Okay, here for this add function, it will execute, again come back to stage number, that is to the next stage. Again execute stage number 3, stage number 4. Again when it is there at stage number 5, just jump to this add, perform addition, come back here, right? So in this case, the main is called as a calling function, right? And the add is called as a called function, right? So the calling function needs the information about called function, right? So for that, the function declaration is used, and it is also known as a function prototype. So what is the use of this function prototype? First, the function prototype or the function declaration is done in order to inform that a function with above mentioned feature will be defined later in the program. So which are these above mentioned features? The first one is what? Name of the function. Second, the number and type of arguments that are received by function. And third, the type of value that written by the function. So what kind of values? Simple. Here I know that as per my requirement, here from main function I am going to call the add function. So the compiler should know which function I am going to call. So first, the name of function is defined here with the help of function declaration. It should know which kind of arguments that are the values that I am going to pass from main function to add function. Okay, that means I am going to send. Pass is nothing but what? In our what we call this execution, we are going to say this as a send, right? And the third one is what? The value that given back, the data type of a value that given back by this add function, right? So these tasks are basically done by whom? Your function declaration concept, right? So the syntax for function declaration, simple, a return type, name of function, and the list of arguments. For example, here suppose the addition or this add function is going to perform the addition of two numbers. So I will write int, that is return type, right? After that, the add, the name of the function, and here suppose I am using two variables, int x and int y, right? And here I am going to terminate it with a semicolon, right? So this is what? This is simple, the syntax or the first stage, that is what the function declaration. In short, it informs the compiler that add is one of the function that is called by main function later in program execution. This function is basically going to make use of x and y variable whose data type is an integer, and after performing the task, the value that given by the as a output by this add function is with the data type as an integer. So this much information is passed by this function declaration. Now the next stage, the important one, this is the function definition. What is function definition? Simple, the whole description and the code of a function. It tells what the function is going to do and what are its input and outputs. So here the syntax is simple, a return type, name of function, list of argument, and inside this We are going to define the variable, the required statements, and simple. At last, I am going to define this return. So, let us relate this concept of function definition with some practical example, right? So we know that the syntax for function definition, first we are going to define this return type, followed with name of function, and inside the bracket we are defining the variables. As we have seen, arguments are nothing but what the simple variables that we are using in our program. Okay, then local variable declaration statements, then the return expression. So suppose I want to do the addition of two integer numbers, so corresponding to that I'm going to define the definition for the function over here, right? So first I'm going to define the data type, the return type as a int, integer. Why? Because here I'm going to add two variable values, say variable x and variable y, and both possess the data type as a integer. So whatever result that produced here, that result is also with a data type as a integer, and that's why I am going to define here the data type, the return type as a integer. Then add is a name of my function, right? So basically to understand this function, right, so whenever you are going to define the name of function, it should be generalized, right? You can write anything. I will write here as a etc or dkte, okay, whatever the name of function. It's not like that to perform the addition I have to write only the add. You may give any name to your function, but it's better to keep the name and the operation as a same, right? Okay, means what as I'm going to perform here the addition of two integer numbers, I'm going to define the name of this function as a add. Then inside the bracket I'm going to define the variable, right? So these are nothing but what the list of arguments. So inside it declare the z is a local variable because it is having the scope, or it is valid between only these two brackets here, right? Then the statement in sense the operation, right? So z is equal to x plus y, do the addition, then print the result of z, and simple return 0. Return 0. Why we are defining here as a return 0? Because here, no doubt, when I'm going to call this add function from any function, right, in that case suppose I'm going to assign a value to it. Somewhere in suppose main function I'm writing like this. In main I'm defining say add in bracket 5 comma 6. So what will happen here? This add and this name is get matched, so the value 5 is get assigned to variable x, and the value 6 is get assigned to variable y. Now it is going to perform the addition. So what is that? 5 plus 6, and the result is 11. Now the 11 values get assigned to variable z, right? So this value I'm going to print here only. As I'm going to print the value within the same function, so the value of z I'm not going to give back to the main function, sorry, not to this main function, right? So that's why I'm going to define here as a return 0, right? So in this way the function definition works in your simple programming language. Okay, the next and the last stage, that is the important one, is what? Function call. So as we know that the function definition tells that what exactly function does. However, to use it in a program, means to use a specific function in a program, it should be called from somewhere. Okay, and in order to call the function, how to call the function? Simple, write the name of function and inside the bracket the list of argument, and this should be placed in one of the function. One of the function means what? Just I said, right, here the main function, and through this main function I'm going to call this add function. Okay, so the function that we are going to add, this function should be called by defining that into this main function. So here the main is called as a calling function and the add is called as a called function, right? And if there is no any arguments within this bracket, so simply we can put directly the empty bracket. So let us consider this simple example. Right now I am there with three different two function. First one is a function 1 and the second one is a function 2. Here I am not going to define any arguments, whereas here the two arguments are there, that is argument A and argument B here. Okay, now when I am going to execute the main function, the the compiler first execute the main, right? So it going to execute the statement 1, and the moment at which it came at the second stage, that is what function 1, this step, what will happen? The program transfer is directly transferred to this function here. Okay, so what will happen? First execute this line number 1. For line number 2, as function 1 is defined, it is going to jump to this function 1, execute this entire function, and again it come back to this statement number 2. So here whatever this step is there, this step is called as a function call, because we are transferring the execution from the main function to this function 1. Here the main function which is calling this function 1 is called as a calling function, whereas the function 1 is called as a called function in this way. And here if you see, here as no arguments are there, right, I am going to put simple the brackets, and this whatever the name of function and the list of argument, this should be get matched here, because here if I am going to define, okay, let us consider the second. Now what will happen, this statement number 2 get executed, statement number 3 will get executed, and then it jump to this statement number 4. What is that? Function 2 93, right? So what is the difference between this function 1 and function 2? Here the arguments are absent, so even though it's not mandatory that you are supposed to transfer always the argument from calling function to called function, right? So here this function 2 get matched. So the way in which we are going to, or the sequence by which we are defining the values within this bracket, right, the values are get assigned, means as the a first declare, the value a variable a is going to hold value 9, whereas the 3 is get assigned to variable b, right? So again it goes on executing the entire things and come back to this statement number 4, execute it. So what we are doing, as per the requirement, we are going to transfer the program execution from this main function to the called function, and again we are coming back to this main function. So these are what, these are the simple and basic what we call the steps or the stages which are present in C programming language associated with the function. So let us consider one simple example. What is that? Write a C program to perform addition of two integer numbers using add as user defined function. Okay, so first I will write a code and then we will declare it. Okay, so first of all, here hash include stdio.h, then the second step, that is the most important. What is that? Function declaration, right? So as I am going to deal with the integer values, so int add, I am declaring here the variable function, say integer x comma integer y. Okay, so this step is basically called as a function declaration, and that I am defining before the main function and while main. Okay, so we are here, right? So when I'm going to talk about the next stage, what is that? Inside the main function, now I'm going to declare suppose variable, say integer a comma b, right? I'm going to assign two values to it. So scanf %d comma ampersand a ampersand b, right? Then I'm going to simple call the add function. So add in bracket, let me change the color so that it is easier for us to understand. So I'm going to define here one statement, and what is that? Add in bracket a comma b. Okay, and simple I'm going to terminate it. So the same execution we will see by defining the return expression as 0 and with 1 with some value, sorry, not 1. And now here I am going to define this function definition. So int add in bracket integer x comma integer y, then inside it simple int z, and now z is equal to x plus y, and printf %d comma z, and terminate this execution. So here what will happen when I'm going to execute my code? First it's going to start from this main function, declare variable a and b, and here I'm going to assign a value. Suppose the value that I'm going to assign is say 7 and 3. So the variable a is with value 7 and b is with the 3. So this step, right, so this step is called as what? Function call. This is called as a function declaration, and this is called as a function definition. Simple and straightforward. Okay, so what will happen here? Add in bracket a comma b. So what will happen? The value of a, what is that? 7. The value of b, what is that? 3. Now these two values are get mapped with this function. So here add in bracket the value of a comma value of b, and what is the value of a? It is a 7 and 3. So what will happen? 7 is get assigned to variable x and 3 is get assigned to variable y. Suppose you are defining here integer y comma integer x. What will happen? The value 7 will be now assigned to variable y, whereas the value 3 will assign to variable x. Okay, the sequence by which we are defining here the variable, in the same way the values are get assigned here. Okay, so here the values are get assigned. So now this variable x is going to hold the value 7, whereas the variable y is going to hold value 3, right? So now here z is equal to what? Now x, what is the value of x? It is 7 plus 3, so the value is 10, and the 10 value that I am going to print. And as I am going to define the value within the same function, here the return, I am going to define the return as a 0, right? Okay, now the same task. So this step is called as a function declaration. Just say this is called as a function declaration, this step is called as a function call, and this is called as a function definition. So the same task we can do in another way in the sense what, instead of printing the value of z over here, okay, I can print that through main function, right? So for that, let me do some slight modification in my code. I'm going to define, say, one more variable, and say that variable is variable c, and now c is equal to add a comma b, and here I'm going to define print f %d comma c. That's it. Okay, and here I'm going to define the return value as a z. Now what will happen? It is not necessary to print this value here. Okay, so as usual, whatever the values that get assigned are to variable a and b, the same are transferred to variable x and y. Okay, now it is going to perform the addition again. 7 plus 3, 10. Now the value of z is what? 10. And when I am writing here return 0 means what? The value of z, that is what? 10. Now this 10 is given back to this function. So in short, after evaluation, the step c is equal to add a comma b, right? So this step is going to hold after execution the value as what? C is equal to 10, because this entire function is giving us a value of variable z, and variable z possesses a value as a 10. So this c is get assigned with 10, and now the c is displayed on this step, right? So this is basic a concept of function in programming language. Now here we are going to see the same using these code blocks, right? So first I am going to include the header file, and this statement, that is int add in bracket I integer x and integer y, this basic statement is called as a function declaration, right? We are declaring this function. Let's try to get this here. So what it indicate? Later in my program, right, we are going to use the add function. This add function is going to give a return, or going to return an integer value, and x and y, these are the two variables which are basically used by this add function. So this much information is passed by this add function. And now in main I am going to declare two variables, say variable a, variable b, and now here I am assigning the value to variable a and variable b, and this step is mainly called as what? Function call. So in short, what we are doing through this main function, we are calling the add function. As we are calling this add function, the main function is called as a calling function, whereas the add function is called as a call function. Then the program or the definition for add function is over here. So int z is equal to x plus y, and printf %dz. So I am going to print here the value of variable z. So how the things are going to work? The moment at which I am going to call this statement, that is add in bracket a comma b, the value of this variable a is get assigned to variable x, whereas the value of b is get assigned to variable y. Okay, and later on z is equal to x plus y, it performs the addition of the variable values x and y, and it is going to return the result, that is z is equal to whatever the addition value. That is the result in short. And finally the return 0. Why? Because we are defining, or we are going to print the value of z within the same called function. We are not going to send back it to the calling function. Okay, so let us see how exactly the things are going to work here. So as usual, just pay attention towards this yellow colored arrow. Right now it is appearing over here. Now I'm going to deal with this stepwise execution. Okay, So just pay attention toward this yellow color, this what we call the arrow, right? I'm going to assign value. So first value is 8 and value is a 9, right? So here the value to variable a and b are get assigned. The a is now 8 and b is now 9, right? And here, right, so let me simple elaborate this. Okay, so now we are at this function. What is that? Add a comma b. So what will happen when I'm going to deal with the next step, right? So code is directly jump to this, right? So now z is equal to 0, that is what simple your local variable, and z is going to get added with the value of x and y. Earlier the value of a was 8, now it is get assigned to variable x, whereas the value of b, which was 9, now it get assigned to variable y. So x is going to hold a value 8, whereas y is going to hold value 9. Okay, and the addition result 17 that get assigned to z, and directly it is going to give us an output here, right? So here whatever this execution is there, now I'm going to do some slight changes. So simple, suppose I'm going to write here as a c, and now c is equal to add a comma b. So whatever the value that returned by this add function, that get assigned to c. Okay, and now I'm going to print it here, right? And this statement now I'm not going to put, instead I'm going to return a value of variable z. So let us cross check it. Right, so let me debug it again. Here. So go with the stepwise execution. Assign simple values. So now 6 and 5, right? So here it's going to perform the addition, and now just pay attention here. Return z. What will happen when I'm going to execute this? The code is going to assign a value to the variable c, right? And this value is now get displayed on the here, right? Just pay attention. At the end, the value of z is get assigned to this, means your code is now coming back to this main function, means again from called function, which we are coming back to this calling function, and directly I'm getting the output as a 11, right? So here the interesting fact, what is that fact? The two concepts are there with us. What is that? Here in this add function we are declaring integer x and integer y, okay, and in this main function we are using integer a and b. In short, integer x, integer y, these two variables are used in called function, whereas integer a and integer b, these are used in a calling function. For sake of simplicity, I will write this. See, it is used in add function, whereas this is used in a main function. Okay, now what will happen? Okay, here the integer a and integer b, these are called as a actual arguments, whereas integer x and integer y are called as a formal arguments. In short, the variables which are declared in called function or used by called function are called as a formal arguments, whereas the variable which are used in a calling function or to whom we are assigning directly a values are basically called as an actual arguments. Okay? So this is one of the most important concept that present in function.